Pretty sure many of you may have heard by now that Mehdi Hasan has announced that he is officially leaving MSNBC. Now, this comes after Mehdi Hasan, it was announced that Mehdi Hasan's show would be canceled and he was actually being demoted. They were still going to keep him at MSNBC and he would be a part of another show. But as I told you before, when you lose your own show in mainstream media, that is considered to be a demotion, right? Just like when they bumped Don Lemon down from the primetime spot to the morning show spot. He said he wasn't demoted, but that is considered a demotion in broadcast journalism because they're moving you to a spot that receives less ratings, right? So Mehdi Hasan recently has announced, he announced this during his final show, which is part of the Mehdi Hasan show, that he is actually going to be leaving MSNBC altogether. And I want to take a trip back and just show you what I believe was one of the interviews that pushed MSNBC to actually cancel his show in the first place. And of course, this has to do with Israel and Gaza. It was this interview here with Mark Regev, who is the advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And it was this particular part here, I think, that really struck a nerve because it was not too long after this interview that they decided to cancel his show. So let's take a look back and then we'll move forward.
But why should we believe what your government says either? Your military spokesman on Monday pointed to an Arabic document in the basement of a Gaza hospital and claimed it was a Guardian list on which every terrorist writes his name. But that was false. It was just a calendar with the days of the week on it. Your colleague in the Prime Minister's office, Ophir Gendelman, posted behind-the-scenes footage from a Lebanese short film and claimed it was Palestinians in Gaza faking their own injuries. That tweet is still up a week later. That is endless disinformation from your government, is it not?
So this was that viral video that was going around on Twitter, Mehdi Hasan debunking that video from the IDF where they actually pointed towards what was a calendar and tried to say that it was something else. So this was a really revealing moment. And then there's this part here.
I disagree. And I think on the important issues, look, I'll give you an example, Mehdi. Originally, we estimated. No, I'm answering your question. Allow me to answer your question. I'm answering your question directly, if you'll allow me. We originally said in the atrocious Hamas attack on our people on October 7th, we had the number at 1,400 casualties. And now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists. When we make a mistake, we admit it.
Short on time.
Why does that give you permission? Why does that give you permission to accept Hamas's numbers? I don't understand.
I didn't ask about Hamas numbers. I said to you that your military
spokesman... But you were quoting to me before Hamas numbers, Mehdi. You were quoting to me Hamas's numbers.
Because the entire UN and the human rights community and the American intelligence community on Friday said they trust those numbers. But you're dodging my question, Mark.
I'm not sure that's true.
Why did your military spokesman on Monday point to a calendar in Arabic and say these are the names of terrorists on them? That's false. Can you accept that here and now?
No one else that I've seen interview Mark Regev actually went this hard towards him. People question him, people push back on him, but I didn't see them, not in mainstream media, I did not see them pressure him to this extent that Mehdi Hasan did.
I'm not aware of the incident.
Let's put up the image. We have the image. You have no
I can't read Arabic. It doesn't help me. I have no comment. I'm not familiar with the incident.
Does your spokesman read
Arabic? Hang on, I have a question, Mehdi. You're a journalist. Have you made a professional mistake ever? Not intentionally, but have you made a professional mistake?
Exactly, and I own up to it.
Have you made a mistake? So can you own up to the mistake? So if I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, but there's a difference between making an honest mistake and between Hamas that deliberately exaggerates numbers to suit its propaganda purposes. There's a huge difference. So it sounds like it's like
hold on. You said propaganda. Can we just deal with your colleague Ophir Gendelman's tweet? It's still up 7 days later. Why has it not come down? It's a Lebanese short film. We can put it on screen. It's not Palestinians faking their own injuries. Can we own up to that mistake and take that down? Is that not propaganda?
Once again, I understand that was also a mistake. And
so why is it still up 7 days later?
I'll speak to Ophir about it if you like. I'll speak to Ophir about it if you like. He's a friend of mine and a colleague. I quite like him. He's a good man. He's actually very effective. Why is he effective?
Well,
he speaks
he's
mother tongue level Arabic.
Mark.
I agree. He made a mistake, but let's be clear. It's very good that we have someone who can speak Arabic in the Arab networks directly to Arab people, so they can hear Israeli opinions directly.
Appreciate
and
that.
Is amazing at that. He's very important.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay, so you can see what happened during this discussion, and you need to watch the whole interview if you haven't seen the entire interview. But what he did here was he exposed Israel's lies. And he didn't take no for an answer. Don't get me wrong. Joy Reid has, you know, she'll push back a little bit. But the difference was Mehdi was not willing to accept the lie because, again, Mehdi Hasan, he knew what those images that they showed, the calendar, Mehdi Hasan knew what it said. So he was able to push back, right? There was also this issue that we found out like after October 7th, all of a sudden, all of the Muslim hosts at MSNBC that had their own show all of a sudden had disappeared. They were not on the air. So people started to criticize that. MSNBC released a statement saying that they were all on vacation. Really? All of them at the same time? So I think we all know what is happening here. Then there was Mehdi Hasan's final show. Now, this was more recent. Listen to what he says here. He says, without those brave Palestinian journalists on the ground, there will be no one to tell the rest of the world about the ongoing horrific impact of this war on the innocent people of Gaza. My MSNBC commentary on Gaza and the killing of journalists. So here's the thing. Mehdi Hasan has spent years carrying water for the Democratic Party. Again, he was a part of MSNBC, so obviously that was going to be a part of his job. But I still remember when Mehdi Hasan, you know, interviewed Matt Taibbi after the Twitter files, and the way that he sat up there and belittled Matt Taibbi. He was the one that actually started that warfare against Matt Taibbi, basically pushing or pressuring. It was that interview that basically pressured certain members of Congress, like Stacey Plaskett, who's actually just a delegate, to say that Matt Taibbi should be arrested for perjury because of that interview that Mehdi Hasan had with Matt Taibbi, basically saying that Matt Taibbi lied about one of the documents in the Twitter files. Later on, we found out that Matt Taibbi was actually correct and Mehdi Hasan was incorrect. But did Mehdi Hasan issue an apology after that? No. So here you had someone for years try to protect the status quo, say they agree with progressive issues, but all along still trying to protect the Democratic Party, the DNC, and the status quo. And after doing all of that for years, MSNBC still showed him that they can get rid of him too. Because the moment with these types of networks, the moment you step out of line or the moment you start to break away from that status quo, they see you as a problem and they don't want you to be a part of it. Mehdi Hasan basically did all that ass kissing for nothing. Listen to what he said here about the journalists on the ground in Gaza. I'm going to refresh this. Sorry. Sometimes Twitter does that with the videos.
The goal in Gaza, where according to local health officials, almost 23,000 people have been killed in just 3 months. Officially, say the Israeli government and our own Biden administration, the goal is to defeat Hamas, which killed 1,200 Israelis on October the 7th, to eradicate them from Gaza, even from the face of the earth, if that's even possible. But unofficially, Israeli ministers keep saying the quiet part out loud, that the aim of this operation is to clear Gaza of Gazans, what the Palestinians and a growing number of governments around the world are calling ethnic cleansing. Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said in an interview last week on Israeli army radio, quote, if we act strategically correctly, there will be immigration and we will live in the Gaza Strip. We will not allow a situation where 2 million people live there. If there are 100 to 200,000 Arabs in Gaza, all the talk about the day after will be different. And Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said to reporters that the war presents, quote, an opportunity to concentrate on encouraging the migration of the residents of Gaza. He called such a policy a correct, just, moral and humane solution. Now, the Biden administration has said it rejects such calls, and supporters of Israel say these two guys are not important. They're fringe figures. Though I'm not sure how fringe you can really consider the finance minister and the national security minister to be. Ethnic cleansing is, of course, a war crime. But Israel continues to deny that it's committing war crimes in Gaza, even as journalists on the ground continue to document what leading human rights groups and even UN rapporteurs have said could amount to war crimes.
Now, remember, this was a part of his final show. So he was able to just kind of go out with a bang, a bang here. And he is one of the people that has been talking about what the Palestinians are going through in reference to Gaza. Again, he kind of sees this, though, like, look, like, I'm Muslim. I see what's happening to the Palestinian people. I know what this is really about. He totally got it. But it's one of those things where it's like, he was right on this particular issue, but throughout a majority of his career on MSNBC, I just remember Mehdi Hasan just like attacking so many people that he pretty much agreed with in reference to progressive policies just because they weren't the status quo. I watched him lead an entire hate campaign against Matt Taibbi on Twitter. On Twitter, he had everyone come after him. He had AOC come after Matt Taibbi. And look what's happening now.
And those journalists themselves keep getting killed. At least 72 Palestinian journalists have lost their lives since October the 7th. 79 in total. More journalists killed in this conflict than in any conflict for over 3 decades. Just today, Hamza al-Dahdu and Mustafa Thuraya, both journalists in Gaza, were killed in what local officials say was an Israeli airstrike on their car in southern Gaza. Hamza was the eldest son of Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief, Wael al-Dahdu, who has already lost his wife, 2 other children, and a grandson in this war, and has been injured himself from an Israeli airstrike. Let's be clear, without those brave Palestinian journalists on the ground, there will be no one to tell the rest of the world, to tell all of us about the ongoing horrific impact of this war on the innocent people of Gaza.
So to that point, let me ask a question here about the journalists that have been on the ground. If Mehdi Hasan feels that way, then why hasn't Mehdi Hasan invited investigative journalists onto his show on MSNBC that have been reporting about the conditions of the Palestinian people in Gaza for years? Because I haven't seen, and you guys let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I haven't seen anyone from the Gray Zone on Mehdi Hasan's show. Have you seen Max Blumenthal on Mehdi Hasan's show to talk about what he experienced and what he saw in Gaza? Max Blumenthal wrote an entire book about this. This isn't the first time that Mehdi Hasan talked about the Palestinian situation in Gaza. He's talked about it before October 7th. So if he felt like those investigative journalists were so important, how come he didn't invite on any of these independent journalists that have been talking about this for years, that have written books about it? I haven't seen Chris Hedges on Mehdi Hasan's show. Have you guys? Have you seen Aaron Mate on Mehdi Hasan's show? Give me some more. Have you seen Abby Martin on Mehdi Hasan's show? All these people who have been covering Gaza for years. Have you seen Dan Cohen on Mehdi Hasan's show? So what does that tell you? It tells you, number one, that Mehdi Hasan, when he's talking about journalists, he only sees corporate journalists as credible journalists. So he only sees those people and considers them to be journalists. I remember him making fun of independent journalists on Twitter. He knows who they are. And 2, MSNBC probably wouldn't even allow those people to come on to the network. And why is that? And if Mehdi Hasan felt so passionately about this issue, why would he have continued working for this network in the first damn place, knowing that they weren't telling people the truth, knowing that there were real investigative journalists out there on the ground who could speak to this? Even Norm Finkelstein, which I also don't think has been on Mehdi Hasan's show. So why would you stick with a company like that? Because Mehdi was getting paid. And now Mehdi is not. Because he has announced recently that he is leaving MSNBC. And he said this during the final broadcast of his show. Let's go ahead and get into this announcement here.
It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past 3 years with an amazing team of producers behind me and with all of you watching at home. It's been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024 with an election coming, a war still ongoing, and too many Trump trials, honestly, to even keep track of, and with this show going away, I've decided that it's time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hasan Show. It's my last day with MSNBC. Yes, I've decided to leave. To be clear, I am so proud, so proud of what we've achieved on this show, on this network. And I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say, new year, new plans. You can continue to follow me online at Mehdi R. Hasan on Instagram, on Threads, and of course Twitter or X, where I'll give you updates on what's coming next. It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past.
Okay, so remember, again, they decided to cancel his show. He was demoted. They were still going to keep him at the network and just make him a part of another show. But let's not get it twisted, folks. A lot of times when we see people make these announcements, they'll make the announcement to make it seem like it's their decision to leave. We don't know that. For all we know, Mehdi Hasan could have been fired. Or for all we know, this was just all a part of a plan to push him out. And this is what they'll do sometimes. Like they'll make this announcement and say, I've decided to leave such and such, not showing us what happened behind the scenes. There could have been multiple discussions after they decided to cancel his show. And maybe he said some things that they didn't like so much. And MSNBC said, you know what? That's it. Go. We don't want you at all. So I'm willing to bet that it was actually their decision. In other words, he was pushed out. And let me give you an example how they will push you out, not just with network television, but just in general. Demoting you. Canceling someone's show and demoting them basically as a co-host of another show. That's one of the ways that they can push them out. Obviously, if your show is getting canceled, that's not a good sign. That's not good feedback. They're not like, you're doing a great job. No, that's a sign that they're not feeling you. And when they're not feeling you, you know it. That's one of the ways they can push you out. Some of you may have seen this happen in your workplace. This is not just something that's unique to network television. Some of you may think back. Think back to some of the jobs that you had, some of the employers that you worked for. And let's think about the fact that, let's say you had a coworker, and I've seen this done. Let's say you had a coworker and they were in one position. All of a sudden, you're informed that they're actually being moved to a different position, which is actually a lower level than the position that they currently held. That's a demotion. That's also how they will push out someone at your workplace. So the idea is to make things as miserable for the employee as possible so that they want to leave. So either could have happened in reference to Mehdi Hasan's situation. Let me show you something that Mark Lamont Hill said in reference to his experience working for network television, because remember, he used to work at CNN. Listen to what he said in reference to Mehdi Hasan leaving MSNBC.
So what the network does is they fire you. They fire you slowly. They take away your show. They take away your attention. I worked at CNN, and the moment I said that I was voting green and that I supported the Green Party, I was cut out of all election coverage, as if I no longer had a political analysis. Only when black people got killed did I start coming on. And then when I talk about Palestine, I got erased completely. I just kept getting the check every month. But they know that at some point, if you're doing it for the right reason, you're not going to want to just take a check. So what they did was they created the conditions where Mehdi can leave, but it doesn't look like he got fired, because the optics of firing again, the optics of firing Mehdi Hasan in the middle of a war in Gaza would be awful. So what the network does is they fire you slowly. They take away your show, they take away your attention. I worked at CNN, and the moment I said that I was voting Green and that I supported the Green Party, I was cut out of all election coverage, as if I no longer had a political analysis.
Did you hear that? So they removed him from election coverage when he was a part of CNN, when he said that he was going to vote for the Green Party, again, because he's outside of that duopoly. So they don't want that perspective on network television, right? Listen to this part.
Only when black people got killed did I start coming on. And then when I talk about Palestine, I got erased completely. I just kept.
Only when black people were killed is when they would bring him on. So the police brutality cases, right? It's an issue. It's a black issue. So we'll let you come on and talk about that. But when it comes to electoral politics, you just stay out of that, bud, because you're voting third party. So we don't want to hear your perspective when it comes to that. Then he said when it came to Palestine, he was erased completely. That was the nail in the coffin, I think, for Mark Lamont Hill, was that coverage about talking about Palestine, basically standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. They'll let you go. That's what happened to Cornel West. That's why he didn't get tenure at Harvard, because he stood in solidarity with the Palestinian people. They'll let you go. Let me tell you, Zionism is a hell of a drug, and it is very strong and very powerful. So even though he was released, he said they still continued to give him a check.
Getting a check every month. But they know that at some point, if you're doing it for the right reason, you're not going to want to just take a check. So what they did was they created the conditions where Mehdi can leave, but it doesn't look like he got fired, because the optics of firing, again, the optics of firing Mehdi Hasan in the middle of a war in Gaza would be awful.
Especially since Mehdi Hasan is Muslim, right? So MSNBC isn't going to announce that they fired Mehdi Hasan. But what they'll do, like Mark Lamont Hill said, is that they'll bring it forward, let him make the announcement. So it looks like he made the decision himself, when in reality, most likely that decision probably came from producers at MSNBC. Because how are you going to explain that? How are you going to explain, we decided to fire one of our few Muslim hosts that we have here because he actually was against genocide. So, yeah. How do you explain that? That's difficult to do, right? So he's not the first. It was Tucker Carlson. Before that, it was Don Lemon. I think we're seeing a big shakeup when it comes to mainstream media. And I think the question we do need to ask, though, is why is it okay that they have not seemed to, or fired them slowly, as Mark Lamont Hill said, they have not seemed to do this to the two other Muslim hosts that have their own show on MSNBC. And again, I think it's because that interview that I showed you of Mehdi Hasan with Mark Regev, where I felt like he actually went the hardest towards him than anyone else who has interviewed him. So again, just another form of censorship. But it's hard to feel sorry for Mehdi Hasan, because the way that he sent people after Matt Taibbi, this effort to censor and silence Matt Taibbi, now it's happening to Mehdi Hasan. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Mishu. As a former Marine myself, I had to get out because too many crayon eaters. All them crayon eaters like this guy, Mark Regev. The Oracle says, yeah, real journalistic instincts and efforts will be your undoing in the empire. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. San Francisco Board of Supervisors voted 8-3 to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire after over 3 months and over 30,000 civilians dead. It doesn't seem like nearly enough. Dems and Republicans put Israel first and Americans last. Bingo. Thank you for the super chat, Ban Hammer. Call your representatives. Democracy in this country may be BS, but if they aren't getting any pushback, they'll go on like this forever. I agree with that. Thank you for the super chat, Suzanne. Keep truthing and calling out the propaganda. Thank you. I said propaganda. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, David. How much you want to bet Israel pushed Mehdi out? Ooh, David. Thank you, Sean. Mehdi not fit to tie shoelaces of a pilger. Hashtag RIP. That's right. Pilger did pass away. I have to mention that on Thursday. And Denise says, absolutely, Sabby, been there, done that. I had to leave a job because of a dictator boss. That's right.